When you chose sales as your career, you signed up for a life of growth, thus a life of change. While some growth and change is a natural part of the human experience, sales success requires directed growth and change on a greater scale. It's a life committed to risk-taking, and it requires a certain amount of personal bravery to make it happen. We're not conditioned to accept significant and constant changes. Instead, we want to reach stable plateaus. We call these comfort zones. It can require a lot of energy to reach a new comfort zone. Just ask someone who's lost 50 pounds and kept it off for a year. Long-term success in selling requires that you grow in at least 3 important areas. You must grow your knowledge of your products and services. That includes whatever it takes to become a recognized expert at what you do. You must also grow your emotional intelligence. That means fully understanding and managing yourself. It means understanding your values, principles, priorities, motivations, and mission. You must become an expert in all things you. You must grow social intelligence. That means fully understanding what motivates other people. Some of you may have been drawn into sales as a way of getting what you want in life. Hopefully, you know that your health, wealth, and happiness depends on your ability to help others get what they want. In this chapter, we will build on what you've learned so far to help you deal with that single factor that limits sales performance and potential more than any other: fear. Fear is one of the most powerful human emotions. Its grip is strong and persuasive. Every salesperson knows that you must control your fears or your fears will control you. You must also learn to control the fears in your customers. A tough part of our job as salespeople is in helping others understand and overcome their fears so we can earn the opportunity to help them make decisions. Fear is what builds that wall of resistance we so often run into. First, we're going to look into the fears that we salespeople have and what to do about them. Then we're going to look at how we can help our customers overcome their fears as well. Let's start by recognizing that fear is a fixed part of that risk-taking thing we call sales. While few of us would debate that selling requires risk-taking, have you thought much about what you're risking? Some of you might think of risk-taking as the risk that if you don't perform, you'll be out of a job. Guess what? If you don't perform your job at McDonald's, you lose your job there too. So the risk in selling really can't be about risking your job. Besides, you can always replace a job. The point here is this: the risk-taking associated with selling is emotional risk. We all take an emotional hit when we lose a sale or get rejected or get chewed out unfairly or treated less than professionally. We're all afraid that if we take too many emotional hits, we will lose confidence, self-esteem, and even self-respect. The single greatest unspoken truth in life is that being rejected in any form causes us emotional pain. So, what keeps us from asking the most beautiful woman or man in the room for a date? From reaching out to a stranger in need, or standing up and speaking our mind in a hostile crowd? Emotional risk isn't just about selling. When people were surveyed about their fears, they ranked fear of rejection and fear of failure right behind fear of death. At the heart of this fear is the statement, "I am afraid to show you who I really am, because if I show you who I really am, you might not like it. And that's all I got." Emotional risk is important to everyone, not just to those selling something. Once you can manage the emotional pain of failure and rejection, good things can happen to you. Billionaire author J.K. Rowling's first novel, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, was rejected by 12 different publishing houses, and the publisher who finally agreed to publish it only agreed to do so because his young daughter loved the manuscript and demanded a second story. He then advised the author to get a day job, because she would never make it writing children's books. Stephenie Meyer, with a net worth of $134 million, received 9 rejection letters and 5 no responses for Twilight. Stephen King received 30 rejection letters for his first novel, Carrie. And Alex Haley, author of Roots, received 208 rejection letters. The lesson is that dealing with repeated rejection isn't exclusively a sales problem. All successful people have done so. Before we dig more deeply into our fears, it's important that we get a perspective on what we can and can't do about our fears. We can't, and probably shouldn't, get rid of our fears. Some are there for good reason, and besides that, we don't have to get rid of them. What we need to do is control them. Mark Twain said, "Courage is resistance to fear and mastery of fear, but not the absence of fear." And Mahatma Gandhi said, "Fear has its use, but cowardice has none." Imagine two young boys standing on the cliff over the river. Their older friends are in the water and around them hollering, "Jump, jump, jump." The boys know that this is their invitation into the big boys club, and both really want to show the courage to make their first jump. One jumps and the other holds back. Was one brave and the other a coward? Did one have a greater desire for the approval and acceptance of the big boys? Whatever their motivation, one was able to manage his fears slightly better than the other. You've probably heard the story of the two campers who spot a grizzly bear running toward them. One of them starts putting on his running shoes. The other says, "Are you crazy? You can't outrun a bear." To which his partner replied, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I only have to outrun you." The point here is that to be a top performer in your company, you don't have to conquer your fears. You only have to manage them better than your peers. When salespeople are surveyed, they list fear of rejection and fear of failure as their top fears. These are universal fears, and learning how to manage them is pretty straightforward because the entire human race is dealing with the same issue. I hope we've laid the groundwork in our earlier lessons to help you manage these fears. You learned that the best way to overcome fear is with action. You learned that you build down fear as you build up self-esteem. You learn to use affirmations and visualizations to minimize fear as you ease your transition into your next performance level. You learned that making continuous small improvements allows you to avoid having to make the sudden major changes that generate excess fear. You learned that you can help manage current fears by learning from past failures and from clearly accepting your role in past successes as well. What I want to address now are those more hidden, unspoken fears. Almost every sales manager I know has a story that goes something like this. This sales rookie had terrific potential. For a while, he set the world on fire with his sales performance. He made a lot of money fast and got tons of recognition for his performance. His success spurred the entire sales team to up their game. In what seemed like no time, he got a divorce, started drinking, and went into a personal and professional nosedive. These stories all have one thing in common. The person who was succeeding wasn't ready to succeed. In most cases, they harbored deeply hidden fears of success. Dennis Waitley says that procrastination is the fear of success. People procrastinate because they're afraid of the success that they know will result if they move ahead now, because success is heavy and carries a responsibility with it. It's much easier to procrastinate and live with the dream instead of the reality. There are at least two reasons we build up unspoken fears of success. First is the unspoken fear that I'm not worth it. I don't deserve to be successful. By now, all of you should recognize the impact of an inadequate self-image and self-esteem. In previous lessons, you learned techniques and daily work habits to improve your self-image and self-esteem. You also learned the importance of protecting it from those who would lower your self-respect if they could. Having said that, you need to be honest with yourself and look at how you actually feel about success. When you think of succeeding way past your expectations, does it bring you joy and excitement, or does that thought bring anxiety? Another reason salespeople come to fear success is because they've been taught to. You say to yourself, I've seen success and I don't really like the way it looks. Perhaps you've worked in a place where the top salesperson immediately gets promoted to management and takes a 50% cut in income. Perhaps you've watched the most successful people be rewarded by halving their sales territory and doubling their sales quota. Maybe you've watched as the top performer is rewarded by having to move across the country to take over a territory that nobody has been able to mine. If this is your world, either accept it and prosper, or find a place with greater potential for you. Before we look at overcoming fear in your customers, let's loop back to where we started. I told you that you need to grow your expertise in 3 areas. What successful salespeople have discovered is that as you gain expertise in these key areas, you reduce the amount of fear associated with selling. When you know your products, services, and yourself, as well as what motivates your customers, all fears become more manageable and serve their rightful place of keeping you sharp, excited, and performing at the top of your game. Okay, let's now focus on helping our customers overcome their fears. Here are some common, normal, and potentially paralyzing fears that many people face in decision-making situations and what you should do about them. Here are 4 common customer fears we must deal with. First, your prospective client is initially afraid of you. This is simply because you're a salesperson. I think you'll agree with me that salespeople aren't generally accepted with open arms by most people. Accept it. There are some people who are going to be afraid of you just as there are patients who are panic-stricken when they've got appointments with doctors or dentists. What you need to do is conquer the salesperson fear, and you do that by mastering the skill of putting people at ease. Learn to use a relaxed manner and tone of voice. If necessary, review the lesson on communicating your positivity. Next, they've a fear of making a mistake. We've all made decisions we've later regretted. Perhaps we relied on someone we weren't sure of, on their knowledge on the matter. When you're the salesperson, your prospective client must recognize you as an expert. To help people overcome the fear of making a mistake, you need to lay out all the details they require in an easy-to-understand manner. Once they gain confidence in their own knowledge, making a decision will be easier. Thirdly, they fear being lied to. This is where your literature, testimonial letters, and referrals come in. People are more likely to believe the written word than the spoken word. So let them read the good news about your product or service for themselves. Let them see how happy the people you currently serve as clients are with the product and your service in particular. Make sure they believe you with what they see in the way of documents that back every claim and promise you make. The rapport and trust you have established should alleviate this fear, but support it with documents just to be sure. Finally, they're afraid of owing money. Most people have a tremendous fear of debt. If your product or service requires financing, you'll have to be ready to address this concern. Covering the financial details very carefully is key here. You must be prepared to do whatever it takes to replace any fears they have with confidence in the decision they're making and in the service you'll provide. No one wants to handle a transaction in which the client may be dissatisfied with the result. Believe me, there will be cases where the grief you'll get from that client won't be worth the fee you'll earn on the product or service. It doesn't happen often, but you must go into every presentation with a very curious interest in the who, what, when, where, and why of the situation. When you've satisfied yourself that this decision is in their best interest, then it's your duty as an expert in your industry to convince them that this decision is truly good for them.